time for my virtual Jericho with John Mayer.
Hello and welcome to yet another My Virtual Jericho. We've got a rather special edition today. Sunday is a very exciting day in Jericho. Mount Place, the new communal space, which has been redone by a while in Jericho. It'll be thronging with people because there's a book fair. There'll be 20 stalls. There'll be music. You'll be able to come and buy books from publishers, from authors, and anybody else. We're hoping to have. We've got some signed copies of Richard Dawkins' book. We hope to have some signed copies of other authors as well. So what we're going to do for the next 40 minutes or so is meet some of the authors, meet some of the publishers. So that's Sunday from 11 till 4 in Mount Place. Do come on down. First up is Sylvia Better. You're the moving spirit behind this. You behind this and much else. You came to me with the idea. What are you expecting to happen on Sunday?
Well, I think it was your idea, John, because you started it last year, and Jericho resident Ray Falk and Walton Manor resident James Harrison told me about it, because last year we set up the Oxford Indie Book Fair, and it was going to happen in Wesley Mem Halls with speakers and events, talks, and silent welcome during the catering. But of course, it couldn't happen. I mean, you were going to be an exhibitor. So we have booked it for November. But in the meantime, we started this magazine to try and keep it alive. And then James and Ray said to me, look, why don't we have a stand at John's fair and support him? And so that's what happened. And then you gave me the job of recruiting stand holders, which we've done. It's absolutely full, and we've got a waiting list.
Right, so we're expecting approximately about 15 or so publishers, or more than that, and authors? Well,
we've got 5 market stands, haven't we, from Gloucester Green, and they're all for groups. So on those stands, so for instance, I'll be on the Oxford Indie Book Fair stand, and there'll be 4 of us. And similarly, there's the Oxford Writers Group and Writers in Oxford, and there'll be quite a few authors on those. And then there are 10 trestles in Mount Place, and most of those are shared by at least 2 authors, or publishers. So yes, there'll be at least 30, I think, authors and local publishers.
Now, you're a bit of a secret author yourself. Can you tell us about your scribbles, please?
Well, the ones that I think might interest you are the novel behind me, Sculpting the Elephant. Although it's half set in India, my husband was from India, but the other half is in Jericho, right? My protagonist, artist Harry King, has a shop called Decorators opposite the Jericho Tavern. And so half of the book is definitely in your area. And I can write about it, I think, with authenticity, because for 10 years I ran an art and antique centre in the Jam Factory. And I named it the Jam Factory. It used to be called Cooper's Oxford Marmalade Factory. And I thought that was a little bit of a mouthful, and changed it. And the name seems to have stuck. Also, for 10 years, I wrote the Castaway series in Oxfordshire Limited Edition of the Oxford Times. So I sent 120 interesting people from 5 continents whose lives have crossed in Oxford to my mythical island of Oxtopia. And one of them was Colin Greenwood of Radiohead. And they, of course, launched in the Jericho Tavern opposite my fictional hero's shop. And he told me his story. So did, of course, Jericho resident Ray Falk, who's had so many glittering careers. But I suppose the one that he's most well known for is starting the Isle of Wight festival.
Getting Dylan there. Now, what is it about Jericho that attracts writers? You know, Colin Dexter, Philip Pullman, Why are they attracted, A, to write about Jericho, and some of them to live here?
Well, the reason I am interested in writing about it, and I mean, Oxford tour guides a little while ago asked me if I'd give a lecture to do with the castaways. That's these ones, yes, and because they couldn't do an ordinary, they couldn't go in the colleges, you see. And I said to them, there's more to Oxford than the colleges. And obviously, I've spent a lot of my life in St Thomas's at the Gem Factory. And I also started the first sort of antique fair, in Walston Street in the, what was then, OUP's social club. So I know, so I've known the area even just when it was starting to gentrify. And that's what's interesting about it. I like the diversity that you find in places like East Oxford and Jericho. And let's face it, the history behind Jericho, you've got that industrial history of the canals, and that's where we're going to be, right next to the canal. And of course, I'm sure Mark will be talking about that later.
So why should people come along on Sunday? What will they get out of the experience?
Well, I think to be frank, the main thing is a bit of normality, just meeting each other face to face, being able to have a chat, just being able to forget about everything we've all been going through. And then, I mean, I'm looking forward to the music as well. But then obviously, for customers who come along from outside of Jericho, if you don't know it, there's some wonderful walks by the canal. And then there's going to be catering in St Barnabas Church. Well, St Barnabas if you've never been inside, it's different to any other church in Oxford. It's very arts and crafts inspired. And
an Italian cathedral, isn't it? It's a Virtue Cathedral. Now we better move on. So you'll be there on Sunday. We've asked some of the authors to do little commercials for what they're going to be selling on Sunday. First off, Susie Stead about her book. Let's hear what she's got to say.
Stephen from the Inside Out won the Impress Prize for New Writers and was published this year on the 2nd of April, World Autism Day. It tells the raw, emotional and often funny true story of how I, the author, met and tried to do good to a local man with complex psychological needs. I ended up in an unorthodox friendship and found myself falling into his story and charting his remarkable and difficult life.
There we are, Susie Stead, Stephen from the Inside Out. You can buy that on Sunday at her stall. Let's move on to Professor Gary Browning, who lives in Jericho, who is just about to publish a book about Bob Dylan at 80. He's done a couple. My Jericho's ready about it. Gary, what are you going to be selling on Sunday?
Well, I'm going to be selling two books I've done recently. An edited book on Bob Dylan, The Political Art of Bob Dylan, and a book on Iris Murdoch, why Iris Murdoch matters. And I've spoken about both Dylan and Murdoch on my Jericho. And I'm also going to be giving some notice of a new exciting book that I'm doing, Dylan at 80. And I'll have some flyers for that. And that's to celebrate Bob Dylan being 80. And that's terrific because Jericho people, along with me, are writing in that book. Ray Falk, who's been talked about before, who set up that Isle of Wight festival in '69, he's writing in the book. Stephen Sedley, who lives in Walton Street, was an appeal court judge, but he also turned up at the Troubadour in 1962 and met Bob Dylan. In fact, lent Bob Dylan his guitar. So he's writing in the book about Bob Dylan, and there are various other people writing about Bob Dylan, the various singers. Barb Jungar, the great jazz singer, and I went to a performance of hers recently up in London, and she's got a new LP out, a new album out, and I've recommended some of the Dylan songs that she's going to be singing on that album. So that's terrific. Robin Hitchcock, the singer-songwriter, the surrealist singer, he's writing in the book. we've got a tremendous range of people writing the book. Ray Monk, the celebrated philosopher and biographer of Wittgenstein, writing in it. It's going to be it's a lot of fun, that book. The other books I'm going to bring along are fun as well.
Yes, go on, carry on.
Yeah, in that Iris Murdoch is a great interest of mine. She lived in kind of North Oxford. She was kind of one of the most, I think, important people. She's becoming more and more celebrated again as a great philosopher. And it's my kind of book, Why Iris Murdoch Matters, which actually hammers out why she does matter. And for me, she matters because she brings together philosophy, literature and politics in a way that very few other people have done. And she also talks about modern times and tries to understand that. The Dylan book, The Political Art of Bob Dylan, is interesting because people write about Dylan and politics. For instance, it's Dylan performed at Live Aid in 85 and kind of caused a hell of a stir because he said, maybe we should give a bit of money to American farmers as well as kind of people in the third world. And that kind of caused a massive stir. But as with everything else in Bob Dylan, what did he mean by that? And Chris Brown, the international relations kind of theorist, writes about that in that book. So really kind of interesting stuff.
Now, Gary, you're the professor of politics at Oxford Brookes.
Yep.
These are all very popular subjects. Why aren't you writing highfalutin books about political philosophers?
I do a bit of that as well. I write about Hegel, and I was on Radio 3 not long ago talking about Hegel. And Hegel is probably less populist than some of these people I'm writing about here. But I also kind of write about, I did a very big book, write about political thought more generally. I wrote a big book about the history of political thought, about what it means to actually have the historical development of political thought. And I did that for OUP, and that sold a few actually, and that's good. So I do kind of some more kind of more, if you like, more academic work on political thought. But why not write on Dylan and Murdoch? Why not write on things which people which reach out to a wider public? And that's what I do.
You're a public intellectual.
Yeah, well, if you like, I mean, if that means writing in a way which reaches out to people, yes, a public intellectual.
What are you hoping for from Sunday's book market? What are you hoping to get from it, and to whom are you hoping to meet?
Well, I'm hoping to meet kind of residents of Jericho, and a wider public in Oxford. I'm hoping to sell about 300 copies of my various books, but also to alert people to what's on offer. I am very committed to the idea that Iris Murdoch, Bob Dylan have got things to offer, and should be of interest to lots of people. And what I like about the Dylan book that I'm just editing now, I'm proofreading it as more or less as we speak, is that there are all kinds of people writing in it. Intellectuals, non-intellectuals, kind of singers, filmmakers, poets, and also actually there's and people who work in a cafe. So there are all kinds of people writing in it, of different ages and different ethnicity. I mean, Dylan has tended to be written about by kind of older white guys like me, but there are kind of a variety of people writing in this book. So that's good.
Now, you of course live in the Lucy Flats with probably one of the world's most famous authors, Richard Dawkins, somewhere in there. Also there is Bernard Clark, who's a media entrepreneur. Now, him and his son have got together a book for PHSE for school kids. Let's hear his son Sam talk about it.
Come to the Jericho Book Fair on Sunday to see me, Sam Clark, teacher and author of What They Don't Teach You in School, a book designed to support children's mental health and well-being, full of witty stories, engaging tasks, and eye-catching diagrams. The book provides a platform for children to tackle life's biggest challenges. So come and join us in Oxford this Sunday to give your child the boost they need after such a challenging time.
Okay, so his book is called What They Don't Teach You in School. until now. It's only just published, written by him. Wonderful illustrations in it. So it's a rather good book, and that'll be on sale on Sunday. Also, County Council, John Howson, who's a county councillor for the locality. He and his brother got together last year, and last year or the year before they went on a interrail trip around Europe and produced a rather nice, well illustrated book produced by James Harrison, who was also in this program later on, called Twin Tracks. Let's hear from John about that book.
Good evening. My name is John Howson, and here are some background notes about Twin Tracks, a Rail Odyssey. The book started life with a conversation between a pair of twins about taking a holiday together for the first time in 50 years. With a joint interest in trains and a desire to see a variety of cities in Europe, together with the fact that interrail passes were now available to all, turned the initial conversation into a decision to spend 2 weeks in the autumn of 2019 travelling on both the main express routes and some of the branch lines of Europe's vast railway network. The book and an accompanying video, details of which are contained in the book, are products of those 2 weeks. The video, we hoped, would encourage, along with the book, others to think about using trains as a way to see different places. Whilst cruising has become popular amongst many, it has the advantage, after all, of unpacking once but seeing several different cities. It too often has the disadvantage of being restricted to those cities and sites that are near the coast. River cruising has overcome some of the difficulties and has widened the places that can be visited. Nevertheless, there are still towns and cities which do not fit in with either type of itinerary, unless a long land trip is included. Warsaw, Lublin and Milan were places that we visited that would not normally be accessible to passengers on a cruise. We also wanted to show that train travel was relatively inexpensive, not that difficult, and above all fun. The video is available to watch on YouTube. As we were putting it together, the dark clouds of the COVID-19 pandemic were descending. It rapidly became apparent that the expectation that others would travel in our tracks would in the near future be unlikely. This was especially relevant as we were aiming at passing on our message about train travel to all age groups, and particularly our contemporaries, those in the older age groups. They were exactly the people who then were being hardest hit by the virus. As a result, the book has turned out to be something totally different from what we'd planned. Our reflections are now a picture of what has become an impossible trip for many for the last year or so. It was as though we'd been making a record of an experience of Europe in the early summer of 1914 as a guide to travellers in 2015. Although our adult lives as twins have been spent on different paths, we have remained close. Whether because of nature or due to our nurture, we've had many similar interests. Travel has formed a big part of both our lives, and indeed railways has been one of the threads in both our lives. And we wanted to share those experiences and some of our thoughts about travelling around Europe and what we experienced in this book. Will there be another trip such as this? Before lockdown became a part of the daily vocabulary, we had indeed started the planning for another journey using Amtrak to cross the United States. We both visited America a few times and have friends in various parts of the country. Such a project is now on hold. But we were hopeful that the world will not have changed so much that it will not become anything but a memory. If it does, then this book gives you an opportunity to take a trip around Europe by rail and reflect on the many sights and sounds and people that we met. I hope you find it enjoyable.
read John's book. It's very, very good. It's well written. It's well produced. It's got nice photographs, nice tickets. This is the chairman of the county council, remember? So do buy that. He'll be there with his brother on Sunday selling his book. But let's move on, if we can, to another commercial. One of the huge successes of the very first Jericho Book Fair last year was the Penguin store, which sold penguins for 25p. They were sold by a man called Andrew Drew Smith, the Penguin Man. Let's see what he's got to say about what he's doing on Sunday. It's worth dropping into Andrew's store because he's got a very wide range, and there's books which you always might have wanted to read and didn't get around to. You can get them there. As I say, we'll also have signed copies of some Dawkins books and hopefully some signed copies of Philip Pullman books for sale. Moving on to one of the really uber local historians, Mark Davis, who used to live on a canal boat until recently, has made it his life's work to study the history of the canal, the history of Oxford, the history of Jericho. Mark, what are you going to be selling on Sunday?
Yes, thanks, John. Well, I will be selling books about the history of Jericho, as you've introduced me to that. There aren't that many, in fact, for such a really interesting suburb. You know, it was the first planned suburb in Oxford. And so my book, A Towpath Walk in Oxford, is more of a historical walking book in essence. But it has a very substantial section about Jericho. So that's that was not quite my first, but it's always the waterways of Oxford which have fascinated me. And then the suburbs adjacent to those waterways obviously have their part to play. And having lived on the narrowboat in the vicinity of Jericho for nearly 30 years, then I picked up a lot of modern information as well as historical. So I think in terms of what gives me a slight advantage in terms of insights, it's that really. I can see the continuity of the history of the canal. And just to go back to the question you asked Sylvia a bit earlier about what fascinates people like Pullman and Dexter who feature Jericho, I think it is the canal. I mean, it's the canal that makes the suburb so distinctive because, they don't talk a lot about the other bit of Jericho, to be honest. The canal is what features in the Dead of Jericho, for instance, the boatyard, and so on. So shall I go on to tell...
Yeah, well, you actually helped Philip Pullman on his research, didn't you? He took you for canal ride, is that correct?
Oh, yes, he owes it all to me, John, absolutely. Well, we took him on a river cruise, actually, and went up to Godstow. This is, this is 2011, when he was still writing, the most recent of his trilogies, The Book of Dust. And Godstow features very strongly in that. So yeah, and until he tells me not to, I'm going to claim some credit for that, definitely. But now, good, we're on the river. So I also want to mention the other book that might interest people who, if they want to talk, if they want a bit of inside knowledge, a bit of unusual knowledge perhaps about Jericho, and that's my book, Alice in Waterland. Again, it's the river, it's the waterways that have drawn me into this topic, not the books themselves, but there is so much hidden history tucked away in Alice's Adventures in Wonderland and Through the Looking Glass. And so I do have a section about Jericho, partly because the first edition of Alice was printed at the University Press, of course, in Jericho. But there are some other sort of subtle references and reasons to, to give Jericho a bit of a plug in terms of the creation of those stories.
And you'll be talking about that next Wednesday on My Jericho for an hour, won't you? At 5:30 next Wednesday, correct? You'll be talking about that book and...
Well, that's true. Yes, it's the 150th anniversary of the publication of Through the Looking Glass. So, yeah, if people are interested, then I'll be giving an illustrated talk the full title of Through the Looking Glass is And What Alice Found There, but my talk is going to be And What Alice Found in Jericho, because there are quite a number of associations, including the pre-Raphaelite artists who Lewis Carroll knew very well. And I might also just mention then, because we're coming up to Alice's Day, that's on the 3rd of June. Perhaps I won't do that because we want to talk about this Sunday and the book fair. I do have other books available.
We can have an hour of you next Wednesday for those people who have an interest. Okay, let's move on if we can to another commercial from a children's author. So we've got Bob Dylan, Colin Dexter, Philip Pullman, and Mirjam Chappell. Let's see what she says about the book she will have on Sunday.
Hi, I'm Miriam. I'm very excited to be at the Jericho Book Fair this Sunday. I'll be selling a children's picture book called The Magic Dodo, which is about a boy in search of the dodo here in Oxford. And the book contains a map and a trail that the whole family can walk. I'll also be selling greetings cards, some of which are Oxford themed. There is Port Meadow and the Botanic Garden, for example. So I look forward to seeing you on Sunday.
So if you want to see her book, The Magic Dodo, today, Toby's Adventure in Oxford, which is written for her son, A City Safari, she'll be selling that on Sunday at the Jericho Book Fair. Now, from children to war, I hope we've got Liz Wade somewhere there, who's written a lot about war memorials. Liz, which of your books will you be selling on Sunday? Maybe we haven't. Have we got Liz Wade? If we haven't, should we perhaps go to James Harrison? Is James there? Oh, Liz, there we are. Which of your books will you be selling on Sunday?
Yeah, I'll be selling 2 books. One is called 47 Men and one is called At the Going Down of the Sun. I'm not an uber historian like Mark Davis and Liz Woolley. I'm a one-trick pony, really, in that I'm very interested in the Great War. And I got interested because I started work on the memorial at the bottom of St Margaret's Road and Kingston Road. It's the war memorial there, 47 men on it, and I did the research with an extraordinary person called Stephanie Jenkins, and I wrote this book about them. And the problem was that having spent a couple of years finding out about them, it turned into a novel, and the novel is At the Going Down of the Sun, which is about 3 men who come from the war memorial. So I used their backstories, which I knew. They all have quite different backstories, but they're all from this corner of North Oxford. And I took them through the Western Front and what happened to them. I won't tell you the endings because the endings are not what necessarily happened in the Great War. I had the freedom of a novelist to play with that. But
you're based in Jericho.
Which is what happened.
The soldiers get recruited at the cinema, don't they, if I remember rightly? Is that right? Soldiers.
Sorry, can you say it again, John? I can't hear very well.
At the cinema.
Yes. They start off in the Wild Beast Museum, joining up at the beginning of the war. The Wild Beast Museum is now the French Institute at the bottom of the Woodstock Road, but it used to have heads of wild beasts in it. And they pushed those to one side and they turned it into a recruiting station. And that's where our men from here joined up, little realising what they were going to face. But it became a fascination, I have to say.
Right, thank you very much. Now, let's move on to James Harrison, if we have. Do you have James online somewhere? James Harrison, you're the sort of George Weidenfeld of North Oxford. You're the great publisher. You've published a lot of these books. Tell me, why do you want to publish books about Oxford? And do switch on your audio, please.
Is my audio on now?
Yes.
Well, I'm based in Oxford for a start, so it makes life a lot easier to publish books about Oxford by Oxford writers or Oxfordshire, as my clout is fairly local. I basically help people self-publish. That's what I do. So I'm not a fully fledged publisher, but I do everything from the whole production to printing to getting the book out there into a bookshop at least and online. And I started really with non-fiction because that was my forte, having worked in publishing for 30 odd years. So I did Bill Heine's The Hunting of the Shark, which was a fantastic experience to start with. That really got me into Oxford like nothing else. And Bill can open any door that he wanted. So that was a fantastic fillip. And I owe some thanks to you
as well.
What?
Right.
Well, John, you very kindly introduced me to him. So on the back of that, I've published some company histories, some First World War histories. It's the same old story. It's really tough if you're an author. You know, if you're lucky, you get an agent. If you're even luckier, you get a book deal, but most people don't. So what do? They try through an agent, and I always encourage them to do that, or even, you know, try and get on the slush pile. But if they can't do that, well, then self-publish and be damned. Because nowadays, commissioning editors realize that if you self-publish, you go through all the same processes. You have to get up and go to do it. You have to sell and market it in tandem with myself. So you have to go through all those hoops. You produce a very nice little book, but it doesn't stop a big Randy Penguin from publishing it in their own, you know, mysterious way. So just to sort of show a couple of books, we mentioned John and Peter Howson's Twin Tracks. And in fact, that's the actual cover that came out. And, you know, I'm the old school. I like books to be touchy-feely. So I'm a big thing on embossing, on all the nice production values that you would expect from a mainstream publisher, but it's a one-to-one relationship, and you know, at the end of the day, the author's the client, they're the boss, but I do keep a very strict eye on what's going on. On the travel front, on Oxford Folio, I also did Sylvia Better's brother's book, Mike Harry, Around the World by Land, Sea and Air. By the way, all these books are going to be at the fair, so you can pick up a copy, and the authors will be there signing. And he has a claim to fame. He's the only person, he reckons, who's gone around the world 3 times by land, by sea, and by air. So if you dispute that, come along and have a conversation with him. So again, you know, very simple book, but you know, something affordable. And then extraordinarily, I got asked by a lady to do, said, do you do fiction? I said, well, not really, but you know, I thought, well, how do you judge fiction? It's easy to judge non-fiction, but fiction's quite hard, so it's gut feel. So I produced a first book of fiction for a lady called Elizabeth Henderson. She had won a short story competition here in Oxford, and that story is in this book. So she had a good track record, and I helped her publish it, and we went through the whole publishing process. And again, I like a little bit of class. There's the author. And again, the book had some nice endorsements. It's a slim volume, but I'm very proud of it, actually. And then I helped her sell and market it. We do these sort of things, bookmarks and all that kind of stuff. And then that led to another book of fiction, which I'm just going to quickly show you. It's called Mouse Wolf, and it's by Elizabeth Henderson. And I'm very, very proud of this. We got Wayman Hay, who used to be the artist in residence at the Ashmolean, and he did the cover, which is pretty fantastic, actually. So and she's an Oxford-based woman, but she also lived in Beijing. The story is about a young girl in Beijing and befriends a mouse wolf, which is this little creature here, which they do exist in the old artist colony areas of Beijing, if there are any left. And it takes place during the Olympics, when the family are uprooted without any say-so. And it's a really, really good little young
if
adult.
somebody has a book in them, James, what do they do? How do they get in touch with you, and what's the process?
Come and talk to me at the book fair. You know, I'm very happy to chat. I mean, I won't just take any book, because sometimes I think that's not for me. You know, I haven't done really children's books, for instance. So I take a view, and I will say to them, look, if you feel this way about it, then I can put you in touch with Printers Direct. I don't have to have a hand in it, but there are some books I just love to get involved in. But and you can contact me at Oxford Folio. My fiction imprint's called Anglepoise Books, because here's an Anglepoise. And finally, I would just like to say that I was very honoured to print this book called Prayer for the Day, Prayers During a Pandemic, for the Reverend Charlotte Bannister Parker, another local lady. She's one of the vicars at the University Church. And she has suffered very badly with COVID and her family. And again, we just did a selection. This is photographic, but there's a selection of psalms, poems, sayings to help people through the tough times, and is on sale in the church. But we'll also have copies, and she will be there opening the the event.
You open the book fair at 11 o'clock, won't you?
So I think that's a nice thing to have. So excuse the heavy marketing, but there you go. You have to do it.
Very, very good. So if you've got a book in you think deserves to be published, come and find James on Sunday.
Absolutely. Just nothing is out of bounds.
Go on then, James. Come on.
I've just done a screenplay for this chap, Nikita Khrushchev, called "The Case for the Defense" in 9.5 episodes for an ex-professor. And finally, but very quickly, I'm very excited about this. I'm doing a new work of fiction called "The Reluctant Pilgrim," which is the maidservant's tale about Marjorie Kemp, who was a real woman who existed and wrote the first, what's reputed to be the first autobiography in the English language. She didn't write it, she dictated it to a couple of monks. And it's a cracker book, it's a cracking book. And it's written by a lady, Fiona Peregrine, who actually is also a medievalist and academic, so she knows her onions.
So there we are, cornucopia from Folio. Moving on, if we can, to Helen Matthews, who's coming all the way from Hampshire on Sunday. 100 miles round trip, she tells me. Helen, you're a novelist, but you have Oxford connections. Tell us about your novels. And make sure you're
Okay, yeah, thanks. Can you hear me? Yeah, thanks very much for inviting me or for fitting me in at quite short notice. I was very lucky to hear about it through a network of writers who are in groups on Facebook. So I got in touch with John and he kindly fitted me in. So I write psychological suspense mainly. And my Oxford connection is that I went to Oxford Brookes University a little while ago and I did an MA in creative writing. And the reason I decided to do that was that my sort of main career was very corporate, very dry. I'd always been writing, I always wanted to write, but I spent too much time doing sort of legal stuff and financial stuff, and it was draining all the creativity out of me. So going to Oxford Brookes unleashed that creativity back again. And I've now got 3 books published. The first one is this one. Oh, thank you, put them up, thanks very much. After Leaving the Village. So that was a book that I wrote when I already had several others sat in a drawer that I knew weren't good enough. And I decided to stop writing what I know and write something that I had to research that was completely new to me. So that book is a suspense thriller and it's about human trafficking and modern slavery. And I did a lot of research for that book, including traveling to Albania, and doing some work with a charity called Unseen, which works with survivors of trafficking in this country. And they've now appointed me an ambassador. So one of the things that I find really useful when I'm doing talks about books is to raise the awareness of the charity and about the hideous crime that goes on in our cities and villages. Do you want me to pause there?
Who publishes these, Helen? Who publishes these books and how many do they sell?
Okay, so I'm currently published by, this is my latest book, it's called Facade, and it's published by Darkstroke, which is a small independent publisher, an imprint of Crooked Cat that's been around for about 9-10 years. They've got a reasonably good reputation, I believe, and it is traditionally published, but as with all small indie publishers, not much happens on the marketing side. So a lot of that is back to the author. So I do spend a lot of time, looking at opportunities such as this one, where I can talk to people about my books, and I do Zoom talks and, I don't know, book clubs, basically anybody will have me, just to get the word out about the books and get more people to read them. This one, Facade, has been out since September, and unlike my previous books, it's actually starting to do quite well in the States, but that's mainly when it's on promotion. So, when it's on 99 cents or even sometimes on a free weekend, I get a lot of downloads and then you get paid for the downloads. So that's all good. We shall see.
Do you make a living from it?
Oh, absolutely no, absolutely not. If I was very lucky, I might get a meal every so often. But I mean, it's building up. Now that I've got 3 books, the first 2 are with a small publisher called #Press, which is, I would say, is probably hybrid. So even though that book won a prize, it's not really traditionally published. It's only the latest one that's proper traditional.
What are you hoping for from Sunday's book market?
Well, I think, during last year, I had a number of bookings at literary festivals. And of course, because of COVID, they were all cancelled. So I think we had bookings at Ilminster, Mere, Cranbrook in Kent, quite a few. And so that opportunity to get talking about my books when they were really fresh was snatched away. So I just can't wait to be out there, showing people my books and just having a chat with people about them. And hopefully, some of them might be of interest.
What are you writing about now? What's your new novel about?
So the novel that I'm working on at the moment, which is just about at submission stage, I'm going back to my interest in modern slavery. So the first book was about that, and the second two were not. But I've got a major sort of subplot within the new book about county lines, which I know most of you will have heard of. But I tend to think that it's quite important that people do know about these things. But anyway, my books are meant to be gripping page turners, so they are on the dark side. I like to walk on the dark side and go into those areas where not everyone wants to tread, but they're not gratuitous. They are very much about the bad stuff that goes on inside people's heads, rather than, people chalk marks on the body on the pavement.
Well, thank you. We look forward to seeing you on Sunday in Jericho. Do we have Gareth online? Has Gareth come online? If not, is he there? We'll have some music all afternoon. There'll be at least 4 different acoustic bands, including at least half of the Oxford Beatles. So there'll be Canal, there'll be Mount Place, there'll be music, there'll be fun, there'll be refreshments outside the church and inside the church. There we are. Or just come along, 27th of June, from 11 till 4 in Mount Place. Everybody is welcome to come along, and we will be COVID compliant. So we'll actually be able to sign in, and we'll give you masks and everything else. So don't worry about the Indian variant. So that's Sunday. So moving on, if you can, to tomorrow, Thursday evening, talking about books. This is my book, which is called Populism, the Pandemic and the Media, which has a totally star cast of writers. And tomorrow night's event, which is at 6 o'clock, has some of those faces you recognise. Matt Fry from Channel 4 News, Nick Robinson from Today programme, Sir John Curtis, the psephologist Dorothy Byrne, who used to run current affairs at Channel 4 News, and Deborah Bonetti, and Robert Moore, who was the first man to go in, who's the only journalist to go in on the invasion of the Capitol on 6th of January. They'll all be talking tomorrow night from 6 till 7 on the launch of this book, which is published by Abramis, and it's a cracking book, if I say so myself. It's got 44 chapters by some serious stars. So that's tomorrow night, 6 o'clock on YouTube. Go to My Jericho. It'll be able to go from there. Meanwhile, thank you very much. That's it. Next week, next Wednesday, we've got Mark Davis about Alice in Wonderland, Alice in Jericho. But come along on Sunday. You've seen the wide range of books and authors that are available. There we are. Come along on Sunday, please. Everybody is welcome, and bring lots of money to buy lots of books. Thank you very much. See you tomorrow, and see you on Sunday. Good night.
Yoo-hoo!